Welcome back to the Holistic Ease podcast and blog. My guest today is Mandy B. Anderson. I am so excited to have her on and introduce her work to you. Mandy, I've been following you for a long time and I've been to one or two of your events. And before I read your official bio, I just want to thank you for how you show up in the world. You are a person that's very real to the feel, authentic, genuine. You don't sugarcoat things, but you also offer us, a positive perspective, even in the midst of struggle. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I want to introduce you guys a little bit more to Mandy's work. I'll tell you a little bit more about her. She is a keynote speaker, a best-selling author, co-founder of RAYMA Team LLC, and co-host of the She Who Overcomes podcast on Apple Podcasts. She equips women with the leadership skills they need to rise up, lead well, and live with intention. Anderson vulnerably shares her story of living with cystic fibrosis to encourage others to courageously live their lives to the fullest, no matter what they face. She is a certified life coach, an upcoming TEDx speaker, was awarded the honor of being chosen for the top 25 women in business with Prairie Business Magazine in 2020. She lives by the water in North Dakota with her husband, Nate, and their fur baby, Indigo, where she sips her coffee every morning and watches the sunrise, and I love seeing your photos of that. And her book, Dangerous Hope, Planting Something Meaningful in the Soil of Disappointment, is her sixth and newest book and will be available on August 12th, 2021. So you can learn more about this in the show notes, but I'm just going to say right now, you can go to dangeroushopebook.com or find it on Amazon and pre-order it like now. So welcome, Mandy. We are so excited to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for those kind, encouraging words. I was trying to figure out where it was that I know you from, because I connect with people on Facebook and I'm like, I don't know where we met or whatever. So I love that you've been to our events. Thanks for telling us that. So it's been a while since I had one.
Yeah. I think I went to one of your events several years ago. It was about healthy boundaries and how to live with healthy boundaries.
Yep.
Very, very helpful for me at that time.
Oh,
And
good.
your work encompasses so many different aspects of leadership and living intentionally, but you bring your personal experience with cystic fibrosis in, and it kind of infuses everything that you do. So would you share with us a little bit about your story? When did you get diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and what has that journey entailed for you from a big picture standpoint?
Absolutely. I want to thank you, Erin, for having me on your show and for having a podcast where you can share, everything about health with your audience. I think it's important for us to hear these stories and to hear other options. For listeners who maybe don't know what cystic fibrosis is, it is a genetic disease that affects your respiratory and digestive system. And eventually it limits your ability to breathe, which is kind of a big deal. We all need to breathe. So in 1981, the year that I was born, the life expectancy was only in the teens. And CF is a disease that there is no cure for. So we have to take medication every single day. We have to take breathing medications just to be able to breathe normally. We have to take enzymes to digest our food because malnutrition is a huge part of cystic fibrosis. And I was diagnosed when I was 6 months old.
Oh, wow.
And I remember my parents telling me that when they got the diagnosis, I think at that point in time, because medical technology was starting to get some really great results, they had done a ton of research on this disease for the past 20, 25 years to really understand like what is going on and how can they give the best care. The outlook was a little bit more optimistic than maybe what they were expecting, but also they were also told, it might be a miracle if I made it out of high school or, maybe just into my early 20s. And so the life expectancy of CF keeps growing, which is awesome. It's irritating to me on one hand because every time I hit the milestone, they move the marker. So it's I just made it to like 37 and now they've moved the average lifespan to 44. And so it's the thing that I think people in the CF community, we love telling people how old we are because it's a big deal. Mm-hmm. So I'm not one of those women who's like, oh, guess my age. I'm going to tell you, I'm younger than I am, or I'm pretending it's the third anniversary of my 25th birthday. I don't do that. I really do wave that flag of woohoo. I'm 39 and a half. I'll be 40 in December. And it's exciting to be where we're at with the type of advancements that have happened with cystic fibrosis medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So I will tell you that growing up, I was probably healthier than most CF kids that I knew.
Okay.
Now, I've known a lot of people that I've met on the internet with CF, and they had similar health experiences that I did. The thing is, you don't always hear about those, because we always hear about the ones that are really struggling, that have really severe cases. That I have a lot of friends that passed away in their teens or in their early 20s. And so it is a hard disease sometimes, because there's always that reality of a shorter lifespan staring me in the face, whether it's myself or my friends. And so that's a little tricky, but for the most part, my entire life, I've been really healthy on the CF scale. And most of the time you don't even know I have it.
Yeah, when I first met you, I had no idea. And then I started following you on social media, and I was like, wait, what?
Yep.
So what are some things that you wish that everybody could know about living with CF?
Well, so you're a health coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my very first certification in the coaching industry was in health coaching. And so being in that industry and in the wellness industry, you sometimes hear a lot of interesting things. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned on my journey is that you have to marry medicine, like Western medicine, with holistic solutions as well, because they all work together. But I think one of the biggest things that I would like anybody else, especially in the wellness industry, to understand is that CF is not something that can be managed without medicine.
Right.
Part of my story is that I stopped doing my medication for about 2 years in search of a miraculous healing of this disease. And during that time, I only did holistic medicine, like essential oils, nutrition. I went to the chiropractor every week, stuff that I still believe in, like getting massages. I still believe in that. There is incredible value in that.
Mm-hmm.
But I almost died because of that choice. And when I say almost died, I'm not kidding. Like my lung functions were down to 22%. I weighed 92 pounds. I was wasting away constantly. We really weren't sure that I would make it out of the hospital in 2012. And so, I had to kind of swallow my pride on one hand of, here I am saying that God healed me. I had to really wrestle with faith and hope. And did I do something wrong? Did I hear him wrong? And I think through all of it, what I've realized is when it comes to faith, I have never lost faith that God is God and that his ways are miraculous. And it hasn't made me lose faith in him. It has made me realize, like, where is wisdom in all of this? And I have had people come up to me and say, well, if you would just eat differently, your CF would go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's not true. It will get better. Like, some of the symptoms might get better,
Right.
but it's an incurable disease. Like, it is not going away until they find a cure.
Right.
So I think that is something that I wish people would know. And also, as I age with CF, which always sounds so weird to me, I'm a big Twilight fan. And so anytime I hear aging with CF, I think of Bella in Twilight, about aging as though, it's this weird thing. But as I age with CF, I'm realizing that having energy and needing rest is an important thing. And I can't always keep up the same that I used to. Sometimes I do need more rest. Sometimes I need to slow down a bit more. And that's the thing that I think we don't realize as we're getting older with any type of a disease, probably, because any type of disease in your body or illness in your body takes a lot of energy to manage. It takes a lot of mental energy too. And so that's one of the things that somebody had asked me a while ago, like, what do you wish people knew? I wish people knew that this can be a tiring disease. And even though I might not look sick or I might not look like I'm struggling, I do wear out faster than a normal, average, healthy adult.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that a lot of my listeners are going to be people like myself who have experienced long-term struggle with mysterious health issues, maybe even undiagnosable, or maybe in the quote unquote invisible health
Yep.
issues. So I feel like so much of what you're going to talk to us now about the experience of hope and how your faith has intersected
Mhm.
with this whole journey is something that's going to speak not just to the CF community, but just to anybody who's had chronic long-term struggles with their body and with the experience of living in their body. So I mean, there's so many things that I could ask you about this. But one of the things that just came to my mind is one struggle I've had is not letting my body become my enemy,
Mm.
even though my body is really struggling. And
Mhm.
I know I've heard you talk in different lives and things like that on different things that you've done to support your body. But what has that journey been for you, like with like self-love, loving and appreciating your body, even though you have a long-term, you know,
Mhm.
chronic illness that's not going away? What has that been like for you?
That is such a great question, Erin. And I really like, first of all, anytime I share my story, I never look at it as this is just for other CF people.
Mm.
I really do live my life through the lens of I'm going to share what I'm learning because I know we're all human and health struggles can work, like the solutions for that and the hope and the encouragement from other people can work across the board no matter what we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
um I think when it comes to like loving my body, I never really struggled with any of that until I got so sick. So in 2012, when I was losing all of that weight, I've always been a bustier gal, and even in high school. And when I lost all that weight, I really lost it everywhere. But I had to train my brain to stop seeing the emaciation and really look at, okay, what am I thankful for? Because it turned into losing so much weight so quickly, and I couldn't do anything to gain it back. Like even taking my enzymes didn't seem to help, just because of the level of anxiety and PTSD and the panic attacks and the actual infections in my body were just eating up everything quicker than I could put it in. And also my stomach had shrunk, so I was in constant fight or flight syndrome. I wasn't that hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So um, even though I was eating, it definitely wasn't enough to make up the difference. And I had to really train myself to find something to be thankful for. So for me back then, I was like, you know what? I can finally fit in those cute little padded bras from Victoria's Secret. So that's how I chose to see it. Like, yay, look at this. And I know, like, I know that some people and some women especially, they have health struggles on the side of weight where they might be overweight or they wish they weighed less.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I can understand that struggle only from the lens of what it's like to be underweight.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a real struggle. I had to really work through that and learn what can I be thankful for. As I started getting healthier again and back on my medicine, I've worked really hard to be more active. And I have run, a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon. And so now I'm training my brain to consider that I'm thankful for the strength. I'm thankful for the energy. I'm thankful for what my body can do. But a funny thing happened. So there's a new medication that came out in 2019. It's called Trikafta. And it's not a cure, but it's super close to one in the CF community. And there are people who have gone off of a lung transplant list because of this medicine. And I went on it and I immediately, like within the first couple hours, started noticing my coughing was different. Over the next week, I noticed I had more energy. And so I eventually started gaining weight like a healthy person. Like it's always been a struggle for me to gain weight, in the fact that I could maintain my weight, but I never really struggled with, oh, I've gained too much. Like I could pretty much eat anything I wanted. And it really didn't, my body didn't hold fat
Mm-hmm.
like a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
Now it does. And so I have had just over the last like 6 months, I've noticed that being on this medication now for, I think I'm at like 410 days. I don't know. I keep track of it on whenever I take it, but I'm noticing my body is absorbing nutrients differently, and normal is what it is, but it's playing some tricks on my mind, because I look down at my legs and I'm like, wait a minute, those legs aren't mine. These legs are like, they're filled out, they're strong, but they're also taking up more space than before. And so I've had to really, to be honest, have some counseling sessions about it and talk about, body dysmorphia and what is going on, because it's so different. And my counselor just kind of told me, you know, you might have to come to terms with the fact that you might never have the body that you used to have, or, you know, you might not ever have those abs that you hoped you'd have someday, because this might be a side effect of the medicine. And can you get to a point where you're okay with that? And so that's what I'm currently working on, is learning how to embrace the body that I have now and be thankful for the health. And also, what do I want to do about what I'm seeing? What can I do? Do I really care? My husband has lost over 70 pounds over the last 2 years, and he has become a real gym buff. I mean, he looks scrumptious. He's just super yummy. But he also gets up at 5 a.m. and goes to the gym 5 days a week. And I'm just not at a point where I am ready to make the commitment for that. I'm more like, I would like to go 3 to 4 times a week. And sometimes I lift weights, sometimes I run. But I'm definitely not ready to be as committed to get the same kind of results. And I think that's important when you're struggling with health issues, to realize, okay, what's it going to take to where I want to get? Can I actually get there? Or do I need to maybe, you know, rethink this because of side effects of medicine or the reality of a disease? And what am I okay with and what am I not? And if I'm not okay with it, what do I need to do so that I can be okay with it?
I love how proactive that you're being in that process, and that you're just flat out honest, like, this is new for me. This way I'm experiencing my body is new for me, and I need some assistance working through it. There is no shame in that. And it is part of being a whole person, is working on that mindset, whether it's working on gratitude or it's working on loving the body that you have right now. And at the same time, being honest about where you are with it and what your limitations are, and just even what your commitment level is to what you want your body to be. And that there can be self-love all through that process. So going back to what you said before, initially you got diagnosed when you were 6 months. I assume you were medication managed through a big chunk of your life. Then you went through this experience of a couple of years of only doing holistic things until it just about killed you. Now you're back into medicine, but I also know that you've integrated a lot of holistic things into your protocol as well. So could you share with us what that looks like? Because one of the things that we talk about in this podcast is that there can be a harmonization between Western medicine and Eastern medicine, and they can really help to support one another. They don't have to be enemies.
Right.
So what does that look like for you?
So when I was so sick and I was going through that season of a lot of anxiety attacks, a lot of panic attacks, I was put on some antidepressants and some anxiety meds for a season. When I started to get healthier and I had started working with a counselor and bringing basically my entire team together to, you know, everybody knew what was going on. Everybody knew what my goal was of, you know, if I don't have to be on these meds forever, I don't want to be. And so eventually I was able to wean off of both the anxiety and the antidepressants. And now I use essential oils topically for my mental health. So I'm a fan of Young Living. So I will use every day for work, I use energy. I put it on my wrists, I put it behind my earlobes, and then on my chest and on my neck. And then on the weekends, I usually use joy. And sometimes I'll use valor. And I have found for me, those have been kind of my go-to ones for mental health. I also make sure to still, you know, I still go to the chiropractor and adjust my spine and make sure that my neurosystem is working well. And part of that is because as a runner, I'm constantly knocking things out of place. Like if I'm running a ton, I have ribs out of place all the time. And I think it's just partly of breathing with CF and just the running that I do. And I was getting really good at having like monthly or every other month massages, just because when you are active, that's super important. And then I had some health things happen earlier this year, and I ended up in the hospital for a tune-up. And so I haven't had a massage lately, but that is something that I like to work back into my life because there's so many great benefits from it. I will say when I was in the hospital back in April, I think it was the end of March, beginning of April, I had some complications with my PICC line. And I had to have it taken out. I had to have another one put in. And then I also was having complications with both of them. So now I can't really have a PICC line again. I have to have some different options. And I have basically told my medical staff, from this point on, anytime you are putting an IV of any sort in me, I need to be on anxiety meds, because with cystic fibrosis, anxiety that is related to medical procedures is a common thing. And the older you get, the more procedures you have to have, the worse it can sometimes get. And for me, that's how it is. And so I've had to come to terms with the fact that, you know what, there are times where I might need that Xanax if it's related to this. And I've even had conversations with my my medical professionals about, you know, we might not be there yet, but there might come a day where those antidepressants might be another thing, just, you know, depending on what happens with my medical history in the future with procedures and having to go in the hospital more often. If that becomes a thing, then I might have a day where I have to be on that again. And so those are the type of things when it comes to marrying the two that I think are so important. As far as everything else, like I don't drink dairy milk because that has a tendency to produce more mucus, and that's part of the main issue with CF is mucus. And so I have definitely noticed a difference in my breathing by getting rid of that. I don't think I've had dairy milk, like other than maybe accidentally here and there, but it hasn't been a staple in our grocery list for over a decade. And so that, and making sure that I take, you know, whole food supplements. I do that all the time. Eating a more real food diet is something that I need to get back into, because when I was on anxiety meds and everything, I took a couple steps back. So learning to give myself that grace for the times where I fall back to my defaults, which as a kid, my default was, doesn't matter what it is, just eat anything and everything to maintain a healthy weight. And that's kind of what I go back to when I'm in stressful seasons. So I think just giving myself that grace to know that, hey, it's okay to take some steps back sometimes. I know what to do to move forward. I'm able to do it. So, you know, just working through that challenge is where I'm personally at right now.
I love that. So what I hear from you is a couple of things. I hear, first of all, that you're really listening to your body. And that's something that we talk about a lot in my community, is listening to your instincts, listening to what your body's telling you, and then following its orders. So really being honest again about, okay, I can't do this PICC line thing again without some extra support. And we were PICC line twins at the same time. I don't know if you're—
Were we?
Yes.
You know what? Did you send me a message on Facebook or tag me on something? I seem to remember that. I will tell you, with all of the anxiety meds, I wasn't really remembering much, but I do remember somebody said something about that. So
I've got my scar right here from mine. So it is a very anxiety provoking thing, even without— mine was for a dog bite infection, but yours is for like a long-term, yours is for a long-term chronic illness. And so that segues us into hope. And what is the importance of hope, and what has that looked like for you? So talk to us about hope. Talk to us about what people need to know about hope.
You know, in my line of work, I really noticed that people wrestle with hope, especially when they hope for something and it either doesn't happen exactly like they hoped it would, or it's taking a really long time. And so I think hope is something that we all wrestle with. Like, we're all probably hoping for something this very moment. And when I talk about hope, I don't mean like the hope of eternal life from a religious standpoint or viewpoint. I mean the hope that we all have for things to get better, whatever that is, whether it's our current circumstances or our business. People hope for things like equality and justice, even the hope of a cure of a disease. Like, that's a pretty bold hope, right? And it's not going to happen overnight. And I think what people really need to know is that hope is a long game. It's not something that you can just speak into existence and it's going to easily fall into your lap. In my book, Dangerous Hope, I talk about false hope and toxic positivity. And I think, you know, I am a big believer in the fact that our words have value. I say affirmations. I believe in speaking things into existence. But what I've also learned in that is that it's not a magic genie trick. Like, it's not the thing you say to have like this instant reality of it. It's actually directing your brain to where you want to go. It's when you have affirmations as a part of your daily habit, it's training your brain to look for possibilities. It's not necessarily saying, I'm going to speak into existence $1 million and it's going to be there by the end of the year. Now, granted, I have met some people who have done that, but also they've been doing the work for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So they're already like on the path to that.
Yeah.
And I have learned that you just have to realize that it's a long game and there's a process to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk about the cycle of dangerous hope. And the cycle of dangerous hope really is, you have this dangerous hope where you take action. Eventually it falls into false hope. Maybe you're believing in some toxic positivity, or you're just thinking you don't have to work so hard. And then eventually you find yourself in this hope deferred place where it's taking too long. And you're wondering if it's meant to be. You're maybe even saying things like, I don't want to get my hopes up. I tried that last time and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And that is the area where you're supposed to learn something. That's where you're supposed to, plant something meaningful in that soil of disappointment so that you can become stronger and wiser, and you can essentially become the person that can handle what you're hoping for. I think that's what I really want people to know. Like, after hope deferred, it's supposed to go back into dangerous hope. And now you're going another level, right? Like every time you go around that cycle, you should be leveling up.
Yes.
Which people seem to think when you level up, that only means good things, like no more challenges, no more whatever, but every level has new challenges, right?
Yes.
So that's what I think people really need to know. And hope should shift your perspective. The whole process of it should help you start to see things differently or in new ways, or challenge the paradigms that are no longer working.
So one of the things that I've experienced with hope is that hope takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to hope in something, especially if it's something big or it's something having to do with your body. Or I think of people who have struggled with infertility, for example.
Yes.
Just having the courage at all to hope that things could get better or things could change is huge. But what's been an additional struggle for me, and I know that you mentioned it a little bit earlier, is how my personal faith in God intersects with that. Because there have been times where I feel like God has spoken something to me and I in faith have moved forward, and then things haven't necessarily turned out like what I was expecting. And some of those things down the road, years later, I can see what was going on. And some of them I still have big questions about, to be very honest.
Yep.
So what does that look like for you, Mandy, with your personal faith and this cycle of hope? How does God show up for you in that?
Oh, such a good question. I loved all the questions you sent me before we were like figuring this all out, Erin. I was just like, this is good stuff. I think that my relationship with God and with faith and hope is always evolving in the fact that I get more understanding the more time is between something, right? Yeah. Like you were saying, you can look back on something and you can kind of see it now. So I'm going to tell you this story, and I've never actually told this story in a public setting.
Yay.
Till this very moment. So years and years ago, and it was probably during the time that it was either right before I flushed my medication or shortly after. I remember being on a massage table, and usually like if I'm getting a massage or something and it's a real quiet place, I just start to have these conversations with God, and I don't ever hear him audibly. It's usually like this thought that dances across my heart and through my head that doesn't feel like me, if that makes sense. Like, it's not like I have alternate personalities, but it just feels like it's something divine talking to me. And I believe it's God. And so I remember just talking to God about all these things that I wanted to do in my lifetime. And granted, I wasn't even 30 yet when this was happening. And he asked me, are you going to be okay if your dreams don't start happening till you're 40? And I very vividly remember thinking to myself, like, I think I kind of paused for a moment before I thought about it. And I responded in my mind. I said, well, That means I make it to 40. So sure. And between then and now, there has been a lot of heartbreak. There has been a lot of loss. And I'm getting emotional thinking about it because I look back, and shortly after that, like 6 months later, we lost our home to an apartment fire. So I don't have, like, I'm a big journaler. Mm-hmm. And before the fire, I had like journals from when I was like, I don't know, 6th or 7th grade on until, you know, that point in my life. And after the fire, there's only 2 notebooks that I was able to save. And one of them just had, like, I don't know, songs written in it or something, but one of them had this exercise called Be Do Have. Have you ever done that?
No.
Okay, so Be Do Have is an exercise where you set a timer for 5 minutes and you write down who do you want to be. And then you set a timer for another 5 minutes and you write down what do you want to do. And then you do it again and you answer what do you want to have. And it's supposed to be like, you can think about it in a year segment, a 10-year segment, or a lifetime. Okay. And I think the very first time I did this, I did it in a lifetime. And I was able to save that notebook. Like, it's the only one. And it's the only time I had ever actually sat down and wrote these big life goals. And so lately, as I get closer to 40, this conversation has kept dancing through my head and I keep thinking about it. And I can see it lining up now. Like, I can see opportunity. Not that I see my dreams coming true, but I see opportunities lining up that have really been a decade in the making, where if I walk through those doors bravely, who knows what will happen. But I've stuck with it long enough to see that. And I pulled out that journal just a couple weeks ago and I read through it, and it still smells like fire. Like, it's covered in ashes and soot. It's kind of a trigger waiting to happen, but I pulled it out and I read through it and I was like, wow, some of these have already happened. Others could happen in the next 6 months to a year. And so I think for me, like, this whole thing of when you say, you know, sometimes I have these big questions for God. I have those questions too. Like, I look back on things and I wonder, did I take a wrong turn there when I threw my medicine, when I flushed it down the toilet? Like, was that you? Did I hear you wrong? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, because if it weren't for that story, like, if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have this book to write. I wouldn't have had that experience. And so I don't know if I heard him wrong and God just, you know, gracefully helped me come out of that. I don't know if I was doing exactly what I was maybe predestined to do. I'm not even sure if I believe in predestination.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But what I do know is that God has been my constant companion in everything. Mm-hmm. Even when I question him, even when I'm maybe angry at him. There were some years where I didn't really know what to do with the idea of God healing people in a modern age. Like, and sometimes I still wrestle with that. I don't know if that's something we should pray for. I don't know if we should pray for wisdom instead. Like, I don't know, but I bring all of that to God and I tell him, I don't know what to pray. I don't know what to think, because in my experience, it's been this. However, I believe that you are God. And that's where my faith is going to stand, because as humans, we can misinterpret things all the time.
Yeah. Yep. So that is literally beauty from ashes.
It really is. Yes.
to have this notebook and be able to look at all those things. And my next question is about the most challenging season that you've had and how you've worked through it. What has helped you to overcome those challenges? I don't know if you've already shared with us your most challenging season, but is there anything additional that you can add to how you've overcome those challenges of that difficult season?
You know, I think when it comes to my health, that what I've shared so far really was my most challenging season. And I think, you know, a lot of times as a CF person, I get painted into this box where the only story I have to share is CF.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's been so hard for me to want to tell this story, because I didn't want to be put in this box where, oh, there's Mandy, the CF gal. And I know some people put me in that box. It's just a thing that happens sometimes. But that's why I think I work so hard at making sure that I can find an applicable way to share a personal story in a way that isn't just defined by CF. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that was my hardest CF season. But I think, you know, as a coach and as a business person, there have been plenty that sometimes rival that, because I think as a coach, and I would assume that you probably have other coaches that listen to your podcast, whether
Yeah.
they tell you coaches or not. But I think as a coach, one of the hardest lessons that we have to learn is that we can want the best for somebody and we can pull the best out of them. But if they're not willing to work on the inner character and the hard parts, then they will still have the worst pouring out of them at times, even when we are willing to work on that. Sometimes, you know, the harsh parts of us will come forward if we're under stress. And so knowing as a coach that we can never want it more than them, that'll save us a lot of stress as a coach. It'll save a lot of imposter syndrome issues as a coach, right? Like, you can sometimes get to this idea as a coach that if they aren't, you know, standing firm in what you've taught them, that it's a reflection of you, and it's not. It's always a reflection on them. Our job as coaches is to lead them to new solutions and new paths, but we can't make them walk that every day. Right? Like, we have to make sure we're walking that as ourselves to be good leaders. And so I think in that aspect, that has been really challenging as a coach. And as a business owner, I think it's challenging to know, you know, when it's time to move forward from something, when you've maybe held on to it too long, too tightly. There's all kinds of challenges that come as leaders in a business or a team, where you can't know things before they happen. You can only share things with your team and the right people. You know, you can only share it as it comes up. You can't preemptively share something when you don't know it's there. And I think sometimes people expect you to have a crystal ball and know ahead of time.
Yeah.
And that can be really challenging. And so I think in that aspect, like personally and leadership wise, those are some of the most challenging seasons, is knowing how to navigate some of that and figuring out when it's your responsibility and when it's not, and what should be done and what shouldn't be done.
I have experienced the same heartbreak from coaching as I have from hope deferred, in that, you know, sometimes you do want something for someone more than they want it for themselves. And when you can see someone's potential and you can see where they could be headed, and yet there's no follow through, there's no consistency, or they don't believe it enough in themselves yet, you realize that you can't carry them. And that is heartbreaking. It is one of the hardest things as a coach. So I know that you have so many other things that you do too. You do your events, and now you have this book, which is your 6th book. You have 5 other books. You are a businesswoman. What was it that made you decide to write this book, though?
Okay, so it's a really funny story. I'm a big fan of the Hunger Games.
I love it. Yes.
And I was watching the movie. Like, that is the series where if I just need to have something playing in the background that feels like I'm hanging out with friends, I will watch that, which is a little bit morbid when you think about it. But I don't know, there's some comfort in it that I find in the courage and the story. And in the very first movie, the actual Hunger Games movie, President Snow, who is the villain, and he's played by, I think it's Donald Sutherland. He says this phrase where he says, hope. It is the only thing more powerful than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. And he's saying this in context of, we got to give them some hope, but not too much hope that they rise up and do something about it, right? So I kind of, just over the last 2-3 years, I've been playing around with that idea. Like, why is hope dangerous? What is so dangerous about it? And so that's really where it came from. The premise of the story, though, the tagline is planting something meaningful in the soil of disappointment. And there is a strong farming metaphor throughout the whole book. And that came from a conversation that I had with my dad about 4 years ago. Maybe even 5 years ago now, I don't remember. But I had this conversation with my dad where, again, this was a very divine thing, because I felt like one day when I was praying, God said, you need to ask your dad about the process of farming and planting. And I was just like, what? and I just kind of felt like, yeah, you need to take your book, you need to have a coffee date, take your notebook and just write it all down, because there's something you need to learn through this. So I did that, and I told my dad that. I'm like, God told me this. And he kind of looked at me like, what? God told you what? And I'm like, I don't know, but I think I'm supposed to ask you this. So we had this conversation, because my dad was a farmer when I was a kid.
Okay.
And we had this conversation for like 2 hours where I asked him all about farming and planting and what is it that you need to know. And one of the things that I'm really good at is I can hear these concepts and see how they apply in real life, like just the metaphors of them. And so as he's telling me about this, I can see how this applies in life, right? Like reaping and sowing, karma, whatever you want to call it. It's a real thing. We get what we focus on. We're always planting something, whether we're planting hope or we're planting doubt, right? With our words and with our thoughts and our actions. And so that's really where it came from. And so as I was going through this, I started out this book last October as a crowdfunding campaign to see if I could sell enough copies to get it in front of some traditional publishers. And the company that did this, they're called Publishizer. The co-founder of the company was one of the guys that had kind of recruited me to do this. And I sent him my book. I didn't sell the 500 or pre-sell the 500 copies that they wanted. I think I got like around 150, somewhere in there. And he believed in the message so much that he was like, I still want to pitch this to a couple traditional publishers. So he asked me, to get him the first 3 chapters. And so I did that, and he gave me a lot of great feedback. At first I was like, oh, he's not getting the concept and all this stuff. We do that, right? Like we get some positive feedback that's a little bit, we get some constructive criticism. And I think sometimes our initial response is to, put our armor on and fight back. And at first I read through it and I'm like, wait a minute, he didn't like it. Like I got to defend the fact that it's not a CF book and all this stuff. And then as I read it, I'm like, wait, there's actually some really valuable information in here. And one of the things he told me is that it was lacking some focus, and this farming metaphor was really strong, but he gave me some suggestions. And so then I took it back and I realized that the format of it was not following the format of my upcoming TEDx talk, that they kind of go together. And so once I switched it to that, it was super easy to bring the farming metaphor in and to have it all throughout. So as I'm walking you through my story of what it was like to go through each step of the cycle of dangerous hope in that example of flushing my medicine and what happened through all of that, I'm also inspecting my fields of what did I plant? Like, what did I plant during the season of dangerous hope? During that action, what did I need to inspect when I was in the season of false hope? And then in the mulch deferred or hope deferred, it was, what is the mulch, right? Like that's the organic material that gets worked into the ground so that we can grow things from it. So I really had to focus on what is the mulch of that experience. And for me, it was things like, the mulch of my faith, like where did I go wrong? Did I do anything wrong? It was also the mulch of restoration, because there were some times, there were a lot of relationships that I had to have certain boundaries around during that time that were hurtful on all fronts, and we needed to work through that. And so it really is taking you through that whole idea of reaping and sowing through the lens of dangerous hope.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I love the farming metaphors too. That's my family's background. And actually my first podcast was a conversation with my dad about soil.
Awesome.
Kind of ironic.
I'm going to have to go listen to that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because even just the soil itself is a whole spiritual metaphor, and how we're nourishing ourselves and all of those things. So that's just so cool that's the big picture metaphor of the book. So we're looking forward to this book. It's coming out on August 12th, but people can pre-order it now, right?
Yes. And actually you can already order the paperback version on Amazon.
Okay.
The ebook and the hardcover come out on August 12th.
Okay. Super exciting. So what's next for you after this?
So 11 days from now, I have TEDx Bismarck, which I kind of woke up one day like Elle Woods from Legally Blonde, and I was like, I should be a TEDx speaker. And so the last like 4 years, I've been kind of working to figure out what that means. And, you know, I thought maybe I should go to one and see if I even like it. And it's kind of a hard process to be accepted. Like you have to come up with a new idea. And I think I applied 4 different times to different ones before I got in, and then it got rescheduled because of COVID. So this has been a year and a half, almost 2 years in the making. So that's what's next for real. And then, you know, just we have coaching programs coming up at RAYMA Team. We always have like coaching openings, just a handful here and there. We have leadership development programs that we're doing for other companies. And yeah, it's really just working with RAYMA Team. But I think if I had to profess something out in the future, we decided as a company to publish Dangerous Hope and to bring back the publishing division of our company that we had kind of closed up about 3 years ago. And so I think for us, we would love to start working with some indie authors to get their books published and to be their publisher. And so that's kind of a division of our company that we're working on. Dangerous Hope is already a bestseller on Amazon, which happened before I was even ready for it to happen, which was kind of amazing. So we would love to be able to help other authors do that. So that's, I think, long-term, just in the next year to 2 years that we're going to be working on top of the coaching.
That's amazing. And I know after hearing this podcast and your story and getting to know you, people are going to want to connect with you. So what's the best place for people to connect with you?
I would love it if they do. So the best place, you can find us at raymateam.com. That's RAYMATEAM.com. You could also look up mandybanderson.com, MandyBanderson.com. And if you're on Instagram, that really is one of my favorite places to hang out. So Instagram, just look up Ms. Mandy B. Anderson, and you can find everything else that I do in my bio there.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And thank you so much for just being honest about the struggles of hope and the cycle of hope. I am looking forward to reading more about it in your book when I can get my hands on it. And I know that so many others are going to be blessed by just the process that you've gone through of maturing through learning what hope is really about and how to plant better seeds and better soil, if we can put it that way. So thanks for being with us. And thanks for listening today. I always appreciate those 5-star reviews, and I will see you guys next time.